Welcome to the Puzzle of Us podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Peterson, owner and clinical director of Cache Valley Counseling, and here to talk to you today about falling back in love. What changes when couples really reconnect? And I'm excited to talk to you about this today because I feel like this is something that I am talking about so often with the couples that I'm having come in to my office. That many people just feel like, we've just fallen out of love. Like we just are going through the motions of life and like we're friends and we're friendly and we like each other, but we're not really connected. Like, I don't know, are we really connected? It feels different than it once did. And I feel like that is a very common, very normal, very natural stage of things that happen with most couples. So we're going to dive into it today. I do want to quickly mention that we do have an upcoming workshop that is going to dive into this a little bit deeper. So if you're listening to this today and you're like, you know what, I feel like me and my partner should attend this, or this would be a good thing to learn more about, or any of those kind of thoughts come to mind, please make sure that you catch us at our upcoming workshop to do a deeper dive into that. What I mostly hear from couples is that we just aren't seeming to connect anymore. That, again, we're sort of going through the motions and nothing's really like blaringly obviously wrong, right? Maybe a partner hasn't had an affair, or, we're doing okay, but we're just not totally connected. We're not always on the same page. And so I just wanted to touch a little bit more on this because I feel like this is such a common thing that happens for almost every couple. So what do we look for? What does that feel like? Is that normal? We're going to dive into all of that. So ready, set, go. Let's do this. Okay, so let me also preface this just a little bit by saying there are some things that I'm going to talk about that you may already be doing in your relationship, and that is great. Oftentimes when couples are doing a lot of these things and they're just seeming not to connect, sometimes that means that there's usually some deeper things going on, some trust issues that are happening, and I would definitely encourage you to reach out to seek some help sooner rather than later. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are just common routine things that people get out of habit of doing. So usually it's not about couples loving each other less or needing more from each other. It's usually just about the connection fades when we aren't putting time, effort into building the relationship, right? Think about when you first get together. I always compare relationships to like stagnant relationships to first starting out. And first starting out relationships, just think about like the passion, the fire. It's like, I want to be with this person 24/7. And you are. You find a way to connect with them, text them, call them, talk to them, reach out to them multiple times during the day. And most of the time, that just kind of fades into like the normal routine of life. But instead of talking about like, oh, hey, I saw this funny thing, or hey, I thought of you when I saw this, it turns into, when are you picking up the kids? What's for dinner? You spend too much money in the budget. Hey, I need more money in the budget. Whatever it is, it turns into these things that we need from each other instead of like these thoughtful responses of, hey, I was thinking about you today on my way home from the flower shop and I saw your favorite flower. I didn't buy it, but I saw it and I thought of you and I wanted to reach out and say hello. Or I wanted to say that I'm thinking of you. Those small gestures, and even just how we're talking about it. Do you see the difference between what subtle of a difference that is, right? We're texting, we're talking all the time, but we're not reaching out because we want to. We're reaching out because we have to, or there's some logistic to solve, or something like that is going on. So just be aware of that. And if you can shift those subtle changes, it can really make a difference in your relationship. Again, most of the time what I find is that people aren't really falling out of love with each other. They're just falling out they're losing habits that really facilitate that closeness. Sometimes their partner hurts them in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't always have to be like affairs or cheating or mistrust in the kind of the big mistrust sort of ways, but maybe just simply by like, I've asked you to do this 5 times and it just seems like you keep ignoring me. That's a hurt. And if we don't talk about it and we don't get those hurts resolved, we start building these protective walls. and they make it really difficult for us to be close, right? I think of oftentimes when I see couples come in, I almost get this vision of, two people sitting on the couch and how thick is the brick wall between them. Both of them building one together and then each of them building one individually that their partner has no idea about. And so think about that. Like, how many times does my partner do something that I'm kind of grumbling, like, oh, I really wish they wouldn't do that. And maybe they're completely unaware of it. Oftentimes that is the case.
Hey, Chelsea here. I wanted to tell you about our Cultivating Connections course. This course helps seasoned couples not just survive their marriage, but actually thrive in it. This course will take you through all the steps needed to reconnect with your lifelong love. Almost all of the couples that have taken this course tell me that they feel the same spark they felt when they first started dating. Don't miss this. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more.
So I want to tell you guys a little story about a recent client couple that I saw, and they were your typical Jane and Joe. They were, I think they had 3 or 4 kids, maybe 5. And they've been together about 15 years, 14, 15 years. And, they've done all of things, right? They've renovated a house together. They put each other through school. They're now into careers. And they're in the middle of raising their children. And they've created a very beautiful life together. And they both came in and just really wanting to reconnect. They were struggling with one of their kids, parenting their kids, but they just really were like feeling like we just don't connect anymore. Like, I'm not really sure. They weren't empty nesters yet. They still had, plenty of kids at home that they weren't going to be, spending a lot of alone time together relatively soon, which I often feel like is an indication. This is a side note, but this is often an indication of like when people are getting close to empty nesting, how nervous they are about that, or like, what is this going to look like and where are we going to spend all of our time? Usually is a pretty good indication of, the strength of the relationship. And I hope all of you are very excited to spend time together with your spouse. If you're not, these are some takeaways. Hopefully you'll get some takeaways from our podcast today. This couple really had just gotten into, the routine things of life. He would go to work every day. She was a stay-at-home mom. And she was able to, focus on the kids and get the kids to and from where they needed to go, which often meant, he was busy taking care of a lot of things at work and financially and meeting their financial needs. And she was busy taking care of their kind of physical and emotional needs. And they were creating a great partnership. They had a very good partnership. They did a lot of things together as a family. They really seemed to have, again, a good life. And they both came in kind of wanting to address the connection. They were both concerned that they just felt like when they did have time together and it was just the two of them, that they really weren't quite sure, like, what do we talk about besides the kids? What do we talk about besides work or finances or those sort of things? Like, what do we do? And so they made a really conscious effort, very conscious effort to start date nights again. So they started doing date nights, and then to have conversations of hopes, dreams. What are you working on? What do you find interesting right now? What are you learning about? And just like rediscovering each other. And I got to have a front row seat of them finding a way to reconnect. They would come in my office and they would talk about how sometimes it's hard to have a conversation with you when you are so locked in on your phone all the time. It's hard to have a conversation with you when the only thing we talk about is scheduling and kids all the time. I immediately get overwhelmed and start to feel too overwhelmed, and then I start to shut down and I can't respond. And I'm just like, I don't know, I hope it's in the calendar. I'm not really listening to what she's saying. And as they began to start to talk through how do they show up differently for each other in these moments, but also biggest thing is prioritizing their relationship. They started putting time and effort into their relationship, not just doing life together, not just going through the motions, but really, having the hard conversations. What are we going to do with your mom when we put her into her memory care unit? And when do we do that? And how do we have that conversation? And how are you doing with putting your, parent in a memory care unit? How are you feeling about that? Do you have any, worries for yourself. What does that look like for us, right? Like as they dealt with hard things through life, and also continued to find a way to connect with each other, beautiful things started happening, right? They started to connect more emotionally, and they started to sit closer to each other on the couch when they came in, hold each other's hands. Things were not peachy and roses. There were still hard things that were happening. There were still bumps in the road, moments where both of them got incredibly frustrated with each other. And they were able to know, like, without a doubt, my partner has my back. I know that they care about me, and I know that they know kind of my deepest, darkest secrets, and they're choosing to stay with me anyways. They're choosing to love me anyways. And because of that, they started to have a stronger bond, and physically, sexually, they started having a closer relationship than they've had in a number of years. And they started to understand each other. Both of them were kind of dealing with different, not necessarily really difficult emotional or like mental disorders. They didn't have deep depression or anxieties, but certainly worries and just stress of life. And both of them were able to show up differently for each other in those situations. And it was, again, really fascinating to see. So that's the kind of connections that we're talking about. So oftentimes couples are expecting, this big, hot, heated passion that maybe they once experienced in their relationship, or they're hoping to experience continued in their relationship. And often it is not the things that are in movies. It is not this dramatic, movie-worthy scene of falling in love, but it is the quiet, steady, consistent, and very intentional. This word has become my favorite word lately, is intentional. If I am being intentional about showing up and being present with you in our conversation, I'm getting curious. I'm not showing up to tell you that you're wrong or that you shouldn't feel that way or talk you out of feeling how you feel, but I am taking ownership for how I'm showing up, and I'm able to recognize, hey, this isn't sitting well with me right now. Hey, I'm a little dysregulated right now. I don't think this is the best time to have a conversation about what we should do with our oldest child who's giving us fits. It's being very intentional about the conversations that you're having. It's being very continually safe, emotionally safe. And because of that, I have to be aware of my own emotional state. I have to know when I am feeling a little bit off. You know what? I'm having a grumpy day. Is it just a bad day, or did you pee in my Cheerios? Did you do something that made me mad, or am I just grumpy? Am I worried about something? Am I stressed about something? Is there something weighing on me? Is there, what is going on? And I have to start to be able to put words to that. And then I have to be able to show up intentionally for my partner, because oftentimes they're going through the same thing. And that's when disconnection and missteps happen, is when I'm hurting and I need you to show up for me. And the only thing you do is when I say, hey, I'm drowning and I need some help, they just push you down further. Instead of coming alongside of you and being very intentional about getting curious about your experience. That's when connection happens. That's when you're moved to vulnerability with another person. It's funny, we were watching a movie last night with the kids. I don't know if we have to copyright this or anything, but it was Pixels, the movie Pixels, the new movie with Adam Sandler in it. And he sits down in a closet with a woman. He happens to be at her house, like fixing her TV or something. And he sits down in the closet with her, and he just starts being curious about why she's sitting on the floor in the middle of the day crying. And as he gets, close to her and starts to care about her and has an intentional conversation with her, vulnerability happens. He reads the room wrong, and it's funny because it's Adam Sandler, and he leans in for a kiss. And because he leans in for a kiss, she's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, right? Like, she's feeling vulnerable. They're having that connection. And as they lean in towards each other, there's a misread moment or something that she's not really looking for, and maybe he is. But there's this vulnerability, there's connection. That's what connection is. That's what connection looks like with people, is when we're able to share our hearts in a safe and vulnerable way, and we're able to feel seen and heard by the person that we're sharing it with. And so often people get out of the touch of having those conversations, and it becomes routine, and what do we got right now in life, and what are we dealing with, and what is on our plate right now, that we stop dealing with our hearts. We start sharing, we stop sharing our hearts with those people because we think, oh, well, maybe they've already seen it or they've already heard it or they know this about me. And then we just don't put that time and effort. But we are continuing to change and grow as human beings. And we can't expect to be the same person that we fell in love with 15 years ago or 25 years ago or 40 years ago or however long it was that you were dating. You're not going to be the same person. And so every day it's should be a growth opportunity of what were you experiencing today? How are we growing together? Because we should both be growing, and how are we doing that together? Other things that can really help of just little tiny subtle shifts, right? Oftentimes what I find is that couples are having these kind of conversations, but they're having them either on the phone or as, I'm doing Sally's hair and you're cooking dinner and we're getting out the door for breakfast or whatever it is. There's not these, again, intentional moments where we are intentionally choosing to show up for each other. There are these kind of hectic moments where there's a lot of things going on. I'm always surprised that how often couples don't have conversations having eye contact. Or they'll have eye contact, but it will be halfway across the room. It's not seated on a couch looking at each other and having eye contact, close eye contact. When we have eye contact, we have what's called mirror neurons in our brain. And when our mirror neurons are matching that of the person that we're having the conversation with, we can, our mirror neurons start to feel what the other person is feeling. And so as we become really intentional about these conversations, as we become really intentional about making eye contact and asking them, tell me about your day, those moments can be incredibly connecting, even if it's at the very beginning of the day or at the end of the day. What are you most looking forward to today? What was the thing that hurt the most today? What was the thing that was the hardest? How did you overcome it? Right? Get curious. Get curious about how their day was and do that with close eye contact. Again, it doesn't have to be nose-to-nose eye contact. It doesn't have to be sexual eye contact, but close eye contact where I can see you and my mirror neurons are actually picking up what you are feeling, and I can begin to feel that too. So that's an important part of the intentional piece of the conversation. Some other things that couples can try that I have seen really help is 10-minute check-ins without these distractions. So part of what I've been just talking about, those are ways to check in. What are you most looking forward to? What are you dreading? What do we got coming up this week? What do I need to be prepped for or prepared for? How can I support you? What support do I need? Those are all things that you can ask every single day. Another thing that can be really helpful is a small act of kindness. One way that I can reach out to my partner that isn't something that I already do, right? If I always do the dishes, if I always take out the trash, if I always do the chore, that's great. That's dandy. Keep doing it. But in addition to that, is there one small thing that I can do that I know will make an impact on my partner, right? And it can merely be leaving a note in a car, putting a note in a lunch bag, leaving a note on a laptop for them to find when they open up their laptop, right? It doesn't have to be gifts. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. But in small ways, one way of reaching out and doing some small act of service. So there's the act of service. There's also showing appreciation. Looking for that. What is one thing that I'm really appreciative of? And making sure that I actually tell them. Again, one of those things that I think people just assume that their partners know. And one of the rules of my office is do not assume that we know. We cannot assume that your partner knows because most of the time, even if they do know, they don't actually know it. They don't know it in their hearts. And so we've got to let them make sure that they know that we see and appreciate what they're doing. Hey, thank you so much for getting the kids off to school today. You do that every day, and I am just particularly grateful for it today. Maybe it was, running into someone who is a coworker who's a single parent who's doing it all themselves, and I was particularly grateful. Tell your partner. Most likely, they don't know. And they might say, oh man, it's nice to be appreciated. Another way to show appreciation, which is a little bit opposite, but if your partner asks for something and you say, you know what, I'm really not looking forward to doing the dishes, and you do it anyways, that can mean like, I heard you. I was listening to you. I appreciate you. Thank you for doing the dishes, and I'm going to take that off your plate today. So a little bit opposite way, but a little bit of twist on this kind of a new thing, or the same thing. Always trying something new together, something that you haven't done, whether that's taking we're going to start going for a nightly walk, or we're going to try a new recipe, or we're going to try a new game, or we're going to go play pickleball, or we're going to go to an exercise class, or we're going to learn how to archery hunt or shoot archery, or we're going to learn how to ski together. We're going to read a book together. And we're going to talk about that book, right? Like whatever it is, but trying something new together. Oftentimes we get stuck in these same old ruts, and we do the same things over and over and over and over and over again. And sometimes maybe we try something new, but we usually don't do that with our partner. It's like, oh, I'm going to join a book club, and I'm going to have a group of ladies that I go hang out with, and we talk about the book, and it's going to be super fun. That's awesome. And I'm making connections with these other women, which is fabulous and needed. And what am I doing that's similar to that, that's with my partner? Maybe I'm telling him about this book that I'm reading and saying, hey, this is a book that I'm reading that's really interesting, or this part, I'm not sure about this, or I'm not sure about that. And are we having the intentional conversation, right? Do they care? Are they showing that they care? How are they showing that they care? How are we saying thank you? Those are all little tiny tweaks to just pay attention to in your relationship that can make a world of difference in terms of connection. Also, continuing with like the intentional stuff is just simply asking your partner, what is one way that I can help you feel more loved this week? What is one thing that I could do? And you have to really mean it, and you have to be intentional about doing it, and you have to be intentional about listening. Because if you say it and then tomorrow it's like, yeah, well, I guess I don't really care about that, or that's too hard, or I don't really want to do that, then you're not going to do it, and your partner isn't going to feel loved, and then they actually feel more hurt because they put it out there and they took the risk in telling you, and now they're not getting their needs met. So if you find out, and if they tell you, you've got to make sure that you're showing up and doing that. Make it a point to do it. One of the things that, again, really matters the very, very most is the intentionality and the consistency. Usually it's not these big grand gestures. It's not, I often think of like divorced parents, and when you have like a Disneyland dad, or the parent, the fun parent who shows up and it's all about fun, right? Those are great times, but usually they don't create a lasting relationship. What creates a lasting relationship, what really matters, is that they show up for me even when it's a random Tuesday and I just need someone to give me a hug. That is going to be the parent that kid goes back to. That is going to be the partner that you want to go back to, that you want to seek out, because yeah, it's not all about fun today, but I know that you're going to be there, and you're going to love me, and you're going to be there consistently. You're going to show up for me no matter what. That's what's important. That's what matters. So falling back in love, reconnecting, does not mean going back to the beginning of your relationship. It doesn't mean rewinding the clock. It doesn't mean going back in time. It just means showing up, being present and intentional in your present day conversations. And you can do that starting right now. As soon as you get off this podcast, as soon as you stop listening, you can be intentional. That you are in charge of that, and you can do that. And only you can be in charge of your intentions. And so the more intentional you are, the more connection you will feel in your relationship. A question I want to pose to maybe get you thinking about this is, what is one thing in your relationship that you are craving right now? And as you think about that question, what do I need? What am I craving? What do I want? And then become a broken record, because your partner probably doesn't know what that looks like, doesn't know what it needs. And now it becomes an experiment of like, how am I going to get this need met? What am I going to do to get this craving met? There is an upcoming workshop that I would highly encourage you all to join and take a deeper dive into questions like this. Like, what do I need to show up better in my relationship? What does my partner need to be better seen, better heard, better understood, better loved in this relationship? And continuing to do that. Most of the time, I, haven't met a partner or a relationship that doesn't care the very most about their relationship. And sometimes people just get lost in the shuffle and relationship gets put on the back burner and we kind of get lost in the shuffle. And so I would highly encourage you to not let that happen to your relationship. So we do have a free intimacy guide that if you have not received that, I would highly encourage you to sign up for our intimacy guide and just check that out and get some additional resources on how to help improve your intimacy today. It can be it's a short little pamphlet that can really help kind of just, again, point out some points, point out some parts of your relationship that might need just tiny little tweaks here and there. And really, if you are finding that this episode was really helpful for you, I would highly encourage you to share it with your partner and then have a discussion about it. Meet tonight or tomorrow or after you've both had a chance to listen to it and figure out, what are we going to do? What are the small tweaks that our relationship needs to really keep the love alive, to really rekindle our relationship, to really make sure that we are being very intentional about our relationship. And be sure to tune in to our future episodes as we've got more relationship tips coming up. Coming down the pike, we've got some more relationship tips coming, and we're so grateful to have you as listeners. Thank you for listening, and be sure to share us with your partners and any friends who might also be needing this podcast today. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time on The Puzzle of Us.